looking at something and it provoking a thought, which for me, when I look at food or art, and I don't know if we actually recorded the fact that I just bought my first piece of art a year ago by a guy named Matt Herget, which was a friend of mine that came up in the food and beverage industry just like me, and that I find extremely talented, a great soul in essence. When I look at his art, it evokes emotion. And for me, I look at all these things like, I don't know who did that.
The large one there, the cabra. It's a goat skull.
Right.
A drawing of a goat skull. And it's by a Cuban painter.
That's a Cuban painter.
Yes. His name is Alexander Morales. He lives here in Miami.
Does he? That right there is incredible.
He lived, at the time he painted that in 2000, he was in Cuba and he was in the army, in the obligatory, the servicio militar. And it was also the height of that special period, which was, Cuba's always had a special period. There's always been poverty, and it was just more acute during that period, perhaps. And he stole a military tent.
Is that what that is?
Yes.
Because I was wondering why it had divots in the middle.
It's a tent. It's a military tent that he stole because he had no canvas. So he stole it.
Right.
And then the paint, God knows what it is. And so there's this wonderful goat skull, which of course just brings in not just the theme of death, but also of rituals and magic and whatnot. What I love about that piece is that it unites drawing, painting, and architecture. If you look at the tent in that way, a shelter, and all those things come together in that one image. It's a very powerful painting. I loved it. When I saw it. I just had to have it.
Obviously, this house that you have, this home, is very thought-provoking in several ways. Like when you asked me several times, if you have a question, just ask it. I consume information, and it takes me time to manipulate that into a question. And there's so much information to take in here.
I know.
The only thing that really struck me, so many things did, but that would equate a thought or a question, was the crow, the door. Because to me, that means so many things, apart from the fact that someone did it. And this piece, because I felt like there was more behind it than just the fact that someone did a goat's head. Mm-hmm. And I saw the divots and I saw the things.
So it's just the very surface is something that is telling you you can hide in this, you can seek shelter in this.
Right. But that is in essence what art means, right? Like thoughtful art and thoughtful things, whether it be within food or within a canvas or within what that door is.
Let's look at this painting, for instance. This is another interesting painting. It's a female nude, obviously, in a room, and it's called bromeliad because of the image of the bromeliad in the back. You notice there's a lot of distortion in the figures, in the figure itself, and in the room. It's by a Chilean artist who was a dear friend who's also died many years ago. His name was Enrique Castro Cid, one of the most brilliant, if not the most brilliant person I've ever met. Enrique was not just a great visual thinker. He was also a mathematician. He was extremely knowledgeable in physics and mathematics. He was one of the pioneers in computer programming and digitizing, for instance, electromagnetic currents, to be able to study them as equations and so forth and so on. So what you see here is a painting that is Enrique's response, very Latin American response, by the way, to the randomness we associate with modern art. See, we we think of art as, in modern art, the painter wants to, splat paint and do this and that. It's all about freedom and abstraction and creating forms out of that emotional or intellectual moment. But Enrique wanted to get away from the randomness that was associated with modernism. So he did it through mathematics. Now, what you see is a painting on canvas, acrylic on canvas. But to get to that image, he would use many different equations that integrated up to 16 different dimensions of space into that image. And that could only be done with a computer. So, and he would pick the image that was most appealing. In other words, he asked himself a simple question. What would that woman look like if she were in a subatomic world? If she were standing in a room that was affected by the different warps and shapes of space at the edge of a black hole, or inside of, in the world of quarks and so forth. And he used these different equations to integrate on a two-dimensional canvas, basically the infinite. It's the entire universe and its laws are in that painting. The loops, for instance, are points of singularity or black holes. And that black hole in turn shapes and distorts everything. Let me put it this other way. We live in a Euclidean world. That is, you walk across this room and every tile is the size of every other tile. It's like you're walking across a ruler.
Right.
Nothing happens to you. Your shape and your form is intact.
Right.
But if you lived in a world of 16 different dimensions, that would be a very different walk.
It would be a much more thoughtful walk.
It would be a very distortioned and weird and crazy walk. So Enrique would describe it as in painting, the infinite starts at the edge of the canvas and moves out in all directions. Mm-hmm. In my paintings, the infinite starts at the edge of the canvas and moves in. Mm-hmm. So here we have a painting who's from the early 80s, whose scientific acumen, whose mathematical brilliance, and whose aesthetic statement is vibrant, is ahead of its day today. What some artists who use computers do, fractals and all that funny stuff, that's all decorative. This is an artist who used a computer as an intellectual device to explore the infinite in a painting. Now, where does Latin America come in? Because Latin American art was not at war with reference, right? Modernism tended to distort and move toward abstraction because it wanted to get away from reference, something that looks like something in a painting.
Right.
That points to something in the real world in a painting. That was considered cliche. That was considered the old stuff. What Enrique does is that he understood that in Latin American art, concepts were part of that art. Philosophical ideas were referenced. In Jesus Soto, the one there on top of the bed, for instance, the kinetic artist from Venezuela, motion and optical effects and
Which
the
one?
infinite.
There's three pieces.
The black and white box
in the middle.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been looking at that a lot.
So someone like Soto was a thinker also in terms of mathematics and the infinite, because Latin Americans were not afraid of exploring ideas in their paintings. Unlike the Americans, for instance, who were like, oh, no, art is just about blobs of paint on,
But I think it shows a lot about Latin American culture.
Yes. In other words, art was a branch of philosophy. In the United States, art was not a branch of philosophy. It's an important distinction. And here you have an artist who's presenting you with very complex mathematical and philosophical ideas in a painting. That's not typical of North American art at all. For me, that's the real Latin America.